Welcome to the Tech Talks Daily Podcast, where you can learn and be inspired by real-world examples of how technology is transforming businesses and reshaping industries in a language everyone can understand. Here is your host, Neil C. Hughes.
Welcome back to the Tech Talks Daily Podcast, where today I'm going to be learning more about a company called Redbox and how they're enabling enterprise businesses to own and unlock the power of their conversational data, which is especially important due to their digital transformation, AI innovation and compliance and so much more, because voice data is amongst the most powerful data sets a business can own, and yet it's not something that they often think about. But it can unlock the doors towards meaningful change by providing a crucial foundation for digital transformation and AI deployments. But because computers aren't as intelligent as the human ear, the level of detail that's captured is actually crucial. And as far as I'm aware, Redbox is the only technology company capable of capturing all voice communications from anywhere, irrespective of its source, location, or new versus legacy systems, etc. So I wanted to find out more about how they're driving real innovation and change in this space. And now that AI is accelerating digital transformation like no other technology before it, I want to explore how, in order to get maximum benefit from AI, businesses must have complete control of the fuel that drives it. And that's their data. So buckle up and hold on tight as I beam your ears all the way to the UK, where you can join me and Pete Ellis from Redbox in a conversation about all this and much more. So a massive warm welcome to the show. Can you tell the listeners a little about your journey, how you got here, and ultimately share your origin story with everyone?
Sure, yes. Thanks, Neil. I suppose I'm a veteran of the telephony and contact center industry. I've been in the industry now over 30 years. Yeah. I had a CTI company in the 90s that I co-founded. I suppose that was a great grounding in terms of contact center call control and I suppose voice messaging or voice packets. Great grounding. And that's sort of moving on from that. When I sold that late 90s, I moved to Avaya, really because I thought best platform of that time, best contact center at that time. So the sort of golden years between 2000 and 2006. And I really controlled sort of technical architecture in EMEA. So designs on financial services, banks and so forth. Brilliant time. Loved that. But I suppose, I've always been a techie at heart, but I also wanted to eventually run my own business. A bit separate from when I had a startup in the 90s. It's a bit different when you're very young. So I moved really to Dimension Data from Avaya into a European management role, a matrix management role across 10 countries. And I ran various different business units. And the real sort of goal there was to understand how you run different business units under different constraints. Each country across Europe has different constraints in terms of competitors, life cycle of the products, where that product maturity is in those markets. Across, I was doing contact centers, data centers, cloud, services, UC. So it was a fantastic grounding in business management under probably much every type of scenario you can think of in terms of how do you grow a business under certain constraints and under certain technology stacks. So absolutely fantastic for me. I've fallen on from there when I virtually run every single business unit, and then moved to O2 in the UK. Yeah. And it was to run the non-mobile side of the business, so the IT services. And what was interesting about that was we're building it from scratch, because it was at a time where, it's a long story, but there was nothing really there. So I had to build the whole thing from scratch in terms of which IT services we're going to deliver, who we were going to partner with, what vendors to bring on board, what's the service model, and sort of building a company within a company, which was fantastic for 3 years. And the services were obviously network services, cloud services, again, contact centers, UC. So it's all still in the sort of voice and data networking space. And the only reason I left there was because it got so big that it had to be then become amalgamated as part of the wider O2. And I'm pretty much a startup sort of innovator type guy, and I don't, I suppose, work as well in such large, slower organizations. So I looked for something smaller, and that's where Redbox came along. I wasn't looking for voice recording, to be fair. It's quite a niche area, but it was the right size of a company. It was quite a small company that had a great brand and sort of was punching above its weight, sort of the underdog, which I really liked. And I liked the fact that it was capturing all this data, but only doing sort of one use case with it. which was compliance recording that he'd done for about 30 years. So really exciting opportunity at that time. And I came in to do sales initially. I've run quite a lot more since in terms of development, product, Q services, and now running sort of the product strategy and corporate strategy and partner strategy.
And in a former life, I had a few experiences with Redbox, especially around the compliance issues and recording voices in a call center environment, especially when reading out credit card information, etc. Yes. But can you tell the listeners a little bit more about how you're helping businesses to not only do that, but also own and unlock the power of conversational data to ultimately drive digital transformation, AI innovation, as well as compliance?
Yeah, it's a good question. So, historically, Redbox is a voice recording platform. Been running over 30 years. It's one of probably 3 players that's been in this market that long, operating on a global scale. We're capturing millions of calls and perhaps even billions of calls to customers every year. And there's 2 things one thing we've predominantly done with that, which is run compliance logic against that data, whatever regulatory requirement the customer needs, typically in emergency services, financial services, and healthcare. Sort of the sort of verticals that you typically see it, as well as generally in contact centers for dispute resolution. But what we've sort of morphed in over the last 4 or 5 years is then saying, okay, we have this amazing data set that it's the customers, it's not ours, the customers, but how can we help them liberate information from that data set more easily? So what we've sort of morphed into really is a gateway giving customers access to all their voice communications and video on screen, but mainly voice, from across their whole enterprise to be able to deliver that, whether it's to their own data lake to do their own data scientist work on it, or to the myriad of analytics vendors out there that are doing specific use cases, whether it's surveillance, debt collection, sales performance, enhanced customer service. The actual use cases are just exploding, especially more so in the last 2 years, more so than 4 years ago. So it's incredibly interesting sort of industry now, how it's exploded from compliance. And compliance is still there, but it's one use case now.
And one of the things that really stands out is I think that most businesses now are swimming in data. They've got so much data and trying to unlock insights of them, but they often overlook the power of voice data. So can you just expand on why voice data is actually one of the most powerful data sets that a business can own?
Yeah, it's an interesting one. So obviously, historically, before customers really had access to voice data, everybody uses and still uses CRM type data, and it's sort of data that's in databases that's quite flat and point of time and very specific, black and white, really. Whereas voice communication brings a lot more richness. It's interactive, it's unsolicited feedback. It's one-on-one from the customer, so it's not required a list of criteria that they're sort of speaking against. There's more contextual elements through it. There's obviously emotion as well, but you're sort of getting, as I say, an unsolicited view of that customer into good and bad about how they feel about the company, what works for them, what doesn't work for them. And that's information you can't really get from surveys, from the transactions that they're doing within customer systems. And similarly, an agent perspective, I think it's very hard to understand how an agent's performing and how much coaching they need, how much advice they need, how you make every agent your best agent without really analyzing how they're communicating to customers. And yes, they do it today manually, but to be able to do that consistently across every single conversation they have, with a platform that doesn't have any bias, has a set of rules, can bring in more data about that agent while it's doing the analytics. It's immense. And I think we're really just touching the surface now of how rich this data is. Over the last 4 or 5 years, Redbox has been in this space. We've seen it gone from simple keyword searching from a transcript to full contextual analysis, to then start using the emotion as well, and then building any surrounding CRM data, this flat data, to supplement what's happening in that direct conversation, to really do then the next best action or give statistics on how they should improve their business more. So it's fantastic. It's just richer, and it's now, and it's, as I say, it's not scripted.
Mm. And that's one of the things that really stands out. And I think I completely agree with you when you say that we're just scratching the surface now, especially when we look at emerging technologies such as artificial intelligence. how that is getting valuable insights out of vast quantities of data is just mind-blowing. And on that side of things, can you tell me a little bit more about how you're leveraging AI at Redbox and also the benefits that AI brings that were not available until now? Because a lot of people might think that AI is just another buzzword, but it's so much more than that now, isn't it?
It is, and it is still evolving. I suppose it's not so much we use, we facilitate. That's what we are. I suppose we're the Cisco of the audio capture world. And that's what we want to be. We sit in the middle in terms of consolidating and, as I said before, liberating this data from our customer's environment, because it's still very difficult to access. Even when you're talking about cloud-based telephony, cloud-based contact centers, that audio data is still very difficult to capture. Because you need it uncompressed, you need it in stereo, you need a lot of metadata. The metadata's vastly become important now for when you start doing the analytics, just as important as the audio in some respects. And it is still complex. So what we've tried to do over the last 3 or 4 years is make it easy to capture and then be easier to consume. And we've sort of become that de facto standard for all these AI companies that have been popping up over the last 3 or 4 years. They're getting massive amounts of funding, and rightly so, because it's the sort of new ROI in contact centers and what they're solving. We sort of become that facilitator of those platforms to enable them to access this information in a timely manner and with the richness of data that they need to make their apps stand out and for them to deliver the ROIs, because customers are paying quite a lot of money for these analytics and these AI companies because it's a lot of number crunching in the cloud. They're typically, mostly in the cloud. It's quite, as you said, it's a lot of information, millions and millions of calls a year, and these are some of our smallest customers. So it's important that they get it at the right level of quality and the right level of metadata, because without that, you're just not delivering them back to the customer the analytics that make sense to them.
And of course, many businesses are losing out on that valuable data because other third-party providers might have put up walls of some description to stop them accessing it. So can you tell me more about your belief that businesses should have the freedom to work with any partner they want to unlock the most value from their data? And how equally, I believe that you guys practice what you preach with Redbox's open APIs. Is that right?
Yes, it is. Well, our platform was built from the ground up from an API perspective. We actually didn't build a UI initially, and everything that can be done on the platform can be done by our APIs. Yeah, I mean, it's not something I introduced. It's the philosophy of the company for the last 30 years that it's the customer's data. It's their data, and we should be then facilitating and helping them use it how they wish. Yeah, it's a difficult one because those that sort of, I suppose, hold that data hostage because they have their own application stack. We made a decision not to have that sort of influence on our strategy. So we don't look to make use of the data. We look then to really support the customer in putting it where they want it to be put. So that's the whole premise of our really platform is. But I suppose one of our biggest growth areas in that respect is that we're still being deployed in those situations where we're not the primary recorder, we're not doing the compliance recording, but we're purely come in to actually do the capture of the audio communications for analytics. That's probably our biggest growth area, certainly in the large contact centers, the several thousand seat ones. That there's two main things they need. They need access to high quality audio and all the metadata we can grab, but they also want it in real time. And to do millions of calls a day and to be able to send that data in real time in milliseconds is not easy. But that's what our job is, and that's what we're providing to these analytics companies that have grown up really over the last probably 4 years, a lot more over the last 2 years, and have significant funding and have to show that return. But they're showing some great use cases in the market today. But as I said, it's still scratching the surface because some of the best ones we're seeing, you can still see they can do more. As I say, it's only more recently in the last 2 years that we've seen proper contextual analysis of this data, not just keyword spotting. That doesn't really get you that far. It's a value, but it's not really changing the ball game in terms of accelerating a customer's performance, whether it's improved customer service or making every agent their best agent.
And you mentioned use cases there, and I know we're very early on, and I don't expect you to name any names, but do you have any use cases that you could share that would just help listeners better understand how it might work in their world too?
Sure. I suppose historically, from a compliance perspective, the use cases were around surveillance and compliance. The two biggest growth areas that we see in the market is in the contact center rather than outside of the contact center, and that's both customer service improvements and agent performance improvements. So that they're the two badges. I suppose and historically it was more around customer service. So analyzing post-call, customer calls, and understanding each customer, understanding wants, needs, opinions, what works for them, what doesn't work for them, and really to generate a better customer experience through the contact center. The acceleration that we've seen in the last probably 6 to 8 months is around real-time agent assist. And this is really then, again, still improving customer service, but it's about making each agent your best agent. There's still always a lot of attrition in contact centers with agents, and the training and getting them up to speed is quite significant always. So what we're seeing a lot now is, from a real-time perspective, is that it's essentially like having a supervisor on an agent's shoulder that's listening in and interacting in real time and providing advice, coaching, next best action events, bringing in data from different CRM systems or internal systems, and really adding value to that conversation without being intrusive. And to do that, it's quite difficult because, yes, we can pass audio in milliseconds to an AI platform, but realistically, you need several seconds of audio to get some contextual understanding of what's going on. So to be able to do that, as well as bring in external data and then advise the agent in real time, it is nirvana, I suppose, because as much as you have QMs in contact centers with supervisors manually monitoring and coaching agents, to do that in real time with a level of consistency and all this other data that can be brought to bear, it's just fantastic. Think of the use cases from a sales perspective, making every agent your best sales agent. Customer service, every agent your best service agent. It goes on and on. Debt collection, we've seen on the rise as well now. Maybe not the best of subjects, but again, improvement on how you collect debt from those outbound service agents. For me, that's probably the biggest acceleration area we've seen at the moment. You've still got the customer journey, analytics replacing traditional customer surveys, which I'm surprised it's taken this long to be replacing those, really, because customer surveys, for me, it's a point in time. It's the return rate on those is poor. But you've got to remember, this analytics is against every single interaction, both internal and external, and with a level of consistency on how you treat and analyze those calls, which it just cannot be done manually.
And how does it work in conflict resolution? Is that more about being able to replay back what somebody said when there's a complaint procedure in place?
It was historically, that was one of our obviously use cases in the contact center, was about dispute resolution. So you can play back, and whether that's good for the customer or it's good for the company. I think what we're seeing, and it's still relevant now, I think there's two things that AI brings though in that sense. So from a post-call analytics, it's also potentially being able to preempt that conflict or having that conflict escalate after the call. If you're analyzing it post-call and doing some remediation action, whether it's reaching out to the customer or providing a credit automatically, whatever that may be, it's analyzing every single call and understanding there is a potential dispute coming here. And so let's proactively engage on it. But the other side is, again, going back to real time, and I don't want to keep banging on about it, but it is quite an important area at the moment. Is being able to try and mitigate that in real time. Again, you've got to look at it as a supervisor on the shoulder. That's, for me, is the nirvana of where all these real-time agent assist sort of products are trying to get to. They're not there yet, in my view, but it's moving quick, and the investment's significant. This is why it's, going back to one of your earlier questions, why it's important that I think customers don't, or try and get away from this locked-in scenario with their current providers. Because yes, they have a vertical stack of some good applications to do the AI components, but there's such a massive market out there. There's a lot of people doing some great innovation. And you really, in a business, you have so many different business areas. Each one typically requires something different from this analytics. And there's typically a specific vendor out there that can do that. And that's where, I suppose, where we've then tried to ensure that we have a sort of a rules engine that allows you to distribute this data to multiple places at the same time, based on any piece of metadata that's collected. So again, in an organization, you can send these sales calls to this vendor, these debt collection calls to this vendor, and that's where it's going. And we do, with some customers, send them to multiple places at the same time, as well as to their own internal teams, because the larger customers want to do it themselves as well.
And as you said a few moments ago, the space is evolving very quickly, and we're learning almost every day different use cases, etc. So I'm curious, are there any big tech trends that you're monitoring?
The real time is, I suppose, the big one at the moment. There's some others that we are that's not really distributable at the moment, but the real time is probably the biggest one we're sort of monitoring and active within at the moment and trying to see how fast it's going. Because it really has, to be honest, really properly exploded in the last 6 to 12 months. Not prior to that, because we had real time back in probably 2020, but there wasn't a vendor that could do anything with it. So it was quite frustrating. That was in sort of financial service compliance market. But it's like anything, it cycles. Yeah, it's when is the right time. Like historically, we also had a partnership with a company that was looking at things like social media to advise customers of any opinions they'd seen through customers. So they're analysing the calls and social media and other elements that are out in the public sector to advise companies on their perception in the market. That didn't really take off. And that, again, was probably 2019, 2020. That seems to be coming back. So there's a lot of, acceleration. It's funny because I've been monitoring markets for years and market movements. This one is certainly an interesting one. In terms of the speed and the investments that are happening, it doesn't follow normal patterns you would expect.
And what's next for Redbox? Where do you go from here? I appreciate you probably can't share too much of your plans, but is there any teasers you can leave us with?
No, I mean, there's what more can we do in real time? So it's not just voice, there's other media. So that's always a key one, but it's always been our case. Because as much as we think we've done everything we possibly can, because we sort of build our platform from the ground up over the last 4 years, even though we've been in this game a long time, there's always something new that comes up and something quite weird and innovative. I see stuff every day that we haven't even thought of. The other area that we're investing heavily in, though, and have done historically, is metadata. It's interesting because you wouldn't think, but sort of voice recording vendors, if you want to call it that, but we call ourselves a capture vendor, sort of becoming the golden record in terms of interactions with customers. What I mean by that is we sort of tie everything together. So we're being asked to put CRM records into the metadata we're capturing on every single call, so that when all this information is sort of fed downstream to multiple different players, there's something that ties them all together. So the fact that we're sort of becoming this golden record gives us a responsibility to then capture more and more metadata. For example, probably in the last 2 or 3 large installs we've done, we're capturing about 50 pieces on every single call. Considering these people are doing hundreds of thousands of calls a day, that's a lot of metadata in addition to obviously the audio sessions. So it's an incredibly interesting area, the metadata. It's sometimes what people overlook, that it can be just as interesting. I'll put it in context. So there's metadata about the call, so that's telephony. There's metadata about the contact center piece, so ACDs, queues, skills, agents. There's metadata in AD about users, teams, access rights. There's metadata in CRM systems about customers buying, rates, performance, service, and so forth. Plus there's sort of data in external systems as well. And there's data on the desktop of what the agent's doing. So when you think it's just that piece of telephony data, it's not. It's everything that sits around it as well. What has the agent been doing? While they were providing service to this customer. Because it could be that the customer was getting frustrated, and at that time, yes, the agent was putting in the wrong information or was in the wrong screen. So this metadata piece is huge for us.
Incredibly cool. And I can't thank you enough for taking the time to share everything Redbox with me today. But before I let you go, I'm going to have a bit of fun with you now and ask you to leave everyone listening with a personal note of inspiration. So is there a book that has inspired you, or maybe a song or piece of music that helps you get your head in the zone that we can either add to a Spotify playlist or an Amazon wish list? I'll let you choose either, but all I ask is a story or reason behind your choice. So what are you going to leave us with today?
I'll go with the book.
Okay.
Too Good With Songs. I think this is the book I'm thinking of. It was quite some time ago. It was when I was running the business units in Dimension Data in Europe.
Yeah.
As I mentioned before, each of the countries has their own constraints, their own level of maturity and different IT services, their own competitors. So it was a book that was touted very heavily at the time from Cisco, because Dimension Data was a massive Cisco partner. It's called Crossing the Chasm, Geoffrey Moore. It's a well-known book. I don't think it's anything strange, but it's about adoption cycles and what you do in each one of those cycles, whether it's the early innovation, early adopters, early maturity, large maturity, and then laggards. And it talks about understanding of each of those stages. How do you set your go-to-market and your services? What do you look to do? And for me, that was an absolute killer across the 10 countries, because they're all different, from Luxembourg to Italy to Spain to France to Germany. They have their own constraints, both culturally as well as maturity of IT services and competitors. And it was perfect for understanding how you then model your go-to-market for each of those different scenarios and each of those different products. And I read a lot of books, not so much business books, a lot of autobiographies, but that's the one that's ever really allowed me to sort of map out a strategy clearly. Now, I suppose the question is, does it work these days with such market shifts? I think you can still take learnings from it, but the markets move so differently now. I'm not sure they work in the same way at all. I'm not sure the AI market that we're in now moves in that same way, but certainly for traditional businesses and traditional IT services business, it's a must read in my view.
Awesome choice. And I'll get that added to our Amazon wish list. And finally, before I let you go, for anyone listening wants to find out more information about Redbox, anything we talked about today, or even contact your team, what's the best starting point for everything?
It's, as usual, our website, which is redboxvoice.com. It's always the best place.
Well, I'll add that link to the show notes so people can find you nice and easy. So much I've loved about chatting with you today, especially how this industry is continuously evolving. And like you said at the very beginning, we're only just scratching the surface when exploring the art of the possible and the kind of insights that artificial intelligence will unlock from those data points of millions and millions of calls. Incredibly exciting. But more than anything, just thank you for sharing that with me today.
No, thanks for your time, Neil. I appreciate it.
The big takeaway from my conversation here with Pete is right now, businesses' market choice is fundamentally stifled by software providers that may be offering a good price up front, but they're not actually acting in the best interest of their customers because they're controlling various choke points, such as databases, customer data, making it difficult to work with competitors. So I salute the team at Redbox for that belief that businesses should have the freedom to work with any partner they want to unlock the most value from their data. Because every business has got vast quantities of data. They need to own that and then leverage the right tech solution to get those insights out. But food for thought indeed. So over to you. Any questions, any insights, any experiences, good and bad, whatever it might be, email me now, techblogwriter@outlook.com, Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn, @Neil C. Hughes. Keep those comments coming in. And if you've got any questions or you'd like to come on the podcast, same details, keep them coming through. But that's it for today. So I will be back bright and early tomorrow. But a big thank you for listening as always. And until next time, don't be a stranger.
Thank you for listening to the Tech Talks Daily Podcast with Neil C. Hughes. Remember, technology works best when it brings people together.